Hello, my name's Adam Shilton. I'm a founder, technologist, TEDx speaker, and I'm obsessed with answering the question, how can we become irreplaceable in the age of AI? So join me as we support you on your journey to becoming more prosperous, more purposeful, and more profitable. Please like and subscribe. In this episode, I talk with Sam Mallikarjunan, General Manager at Agent.ai. Sam's career spans leadership roles as CEO at OneScreen.ai, CRO at Flock.com, and Head of Growth at HubSpot Labs. He's also taught at Harvard and the University of South Florida. Our conversation covers why AI adoption is moving faster than previous tech revolutions and what that means for business, the three main buckets of AI use cases that create competitive advantages, how AI can enhance human communication across languages and cultures, why AI is enabling small businesses to perform at levels previously only possible for large corporations, the coming age of specialists and how AI will change career paths, the increasing importance of trust and gratitude in an AI-powered world, and much, much more. So I hope you enjoy this amazing conversation with Sam Mallikarjunan. Sam, pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. So you're in Florida, the Sunshine State?
I am. I was in Boston, but when the pandemic hit, I grew up in Florida, so we moved back to where, there's no state income tax, and also it doesn't snow here, which is not something I ever got used to living up in Boston.
Very good. It snows here in the UK. I remember a few years back, my wife is born this month in March, and we had snow, so that was good. It cost us like triple the price for an Uber because it took triple the time to get anywhere. So, yeah, no, all good. But no, I want to get cracking. I'm so excited about this interview. So we've had some guests on before where we've spoken about agents and we've demystified some of the concepts. I'd love to talk about some use cases today because I think that's a real gap in people's knowledge at the moment. But I want to start with something that I saw you say recently, and I think it'd be a really good kickoff. So I can't remember the name of the podcast, sorry, but your words were something like you wanted to scare the crap out of people listening so they felt motivated to tackle this. So do you want to start by answering the question, why should people be scared and what should they be doing about it?
Yeah, so when I teach, I usually talk about there's two great ways to motivate change, right? One is fear and the other is greed. There's also spite, but I've never found a business application of spite, but somebody in my class brought it up once. The big thing here is that, we went through digital transformation, we went through the internet, mobile, et cetera, but those were relatively slow changes. Like up until maybe even 2015, if you hadn't gone through all the digital transformation, you have your website and conversion rate optimization and a CRM, automation, all that other kind of stuff, you weren't competitively dead. AI is moving at a much faster pace, right? So the paper that launched all this was something like 2017. ChatGPT is like 3 years old, like 3 or 4 years old, right? At least the demo that we're all familiar with. And so the pace at which people have to adopt things, you can't wait for McKinsey and Deloitte and such to write a bunch of papers saying, here's how you need to do things. Because by the time McKinsey gets around to writing those papers, your competitors who are more willing to tackle things in an area of uncertainty are going to be farther ahead of you than you're going to be able to catch up to. So I say I want people to be scared. Actually, both. I want them to be scared and greedy. I want them to be scared because you don't have the time to just wait for this to happen to you, but also be greedy in terms of there's never been a better. Google got sucker punched by a nonprofit research firm, right? So like if that can happen to freaking Google, then what can you do if you start capitalizing on this stuff right now? So I think both motivating factors should be really strong in people's minds right now.
And you say ChatGPT is 3 years old. I'd never thought of it in those. I mean, my youngest son is 2. Yeah. So I suppose in tech terms, like ChatGPT is ancient now, right?
Well, in AI terms, yeah. I mean, it took something like 10 years to go from there being 150 MarTech SaaS companies to there being 10,000 of them. It took like 10 months for there to be 10,000. If you just go like there's an AI for that.com or something, there's like 10,000 AI agents. So it's the scale of change is much greater than it used to be. The scale and speed of it. So yeah, 2 years now is ancient. It's why I try not to give like very specific advice. It's like, oh, do this, because change is happening so fast that it's more important we understand like the frameworks for thinking about things and be motivated to keep up and not get intimidated than it is that we learn here's how conversion rate optimization works, and here's what lead nurturing looks like, and all those like things that HubSpot was great at educating people on back in the day.
And yeah, there's an AI for that is a great resource, by the way. What was the original tagline? It's like an AI to find AI or something like that. I think that was the first iteration or whatever it happened to be. So yeah, we can talk about agents. I think that, and we kind of touched on this in the last conversation, but we didn't get very far. It was the concept of autonomy versus AI powered workflows, right? And I think that's kind of the scary point, right? Because I mean, anybody who tells you that they don't fear like something replacing them is probably, as we'd say in the UK, telling porcupines lies, right?
Like that.
And I'm the same, so I mean, like, I do a fair amount of stuff. Like, I do podcasts. Like, I create content. Like, I have various income streams. But I still get scared that like there's going to be this like really intelligent like singularity type thing that's going to come across and say, well, no, you don't need to do that anymore for whatever reason. And yeah, maybe it's just paranoia. Maybe it's not, right. But I think people have been led to believe, especially the people that are more interested in AI, that the autonomy side of things was going to come quicker than it actually has. So I remember when ChatGPT was first released, not long after that, you had like Baby AGI and Agent GPT and all of that sort of stuff, and they started scaring people because people would give prompts and it would seemingly go away and sort of try and work things out itself. And I can't remember the name of the Chinese tool that's been released. Uh,
DeepSeek. Yeah.
yeah, but there's another one that is
Oh,
more.
Manus.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. So that's meant to be more agentic, and again, you like literally set it a task, and it'll work towards it, right? But the jury's. I don't really know enough to form an opinion right now, right? So all I can safely say right now is the most usable tools aren't autonomous agents. They are AI powered workflows for specific tasks. And I don't know whether you'd agree with that or whether you want to add to it, but I think that's the best explanation I've got to so far.
Yeah, I agree. People like to talk about how humanity's gone through changes before. I hate it when people use the Industrial Revolution as an example
Me too.
because it didn't happen everywhere at once, and it took a century to happen.
Yeah.
So, like, you were still naming your family, Smith or Wainwright, right? You made wagons. Um, the the metaphor I like to use is actually in the late 2000s. The way I was making money was I was building websites for people, and I was writing ebooks and selling them for $9.99, right? And then companies like HubSpot come out and they're like, hey, now everybody can build websites. They don't need to talk to nerds. And ebooks are now free. They like completely upended that business model. They said, we're going to use it for lead generation and make money on it in a different way. And in terms of AI replacing people, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon because AI now, and frankly, AI in the near future, isn't going to get much better in terms of our ability to trust it than an intern, is what I usually describe. It might be a very well educated intern, right? Fresh out of MIT Sloan with a nice MBA, very smart. But if you don't think that you can be replaced by an intern, like an army of low cost interns, then you're not going to be replaced by AI. And also, if you wouldn't trust an intern to send an email to 8 million people or something like that without checking its work, you're not going to do that with AI either. So we are in the like artificially educated interns phase of AI. And it's good at discrete tasks, right? It's good at research. It's good at solving the blank canvas problem. Like it'll write, something that's fairly good that you then can go and edit. It's good at asking questions. Actually, mostly what I use it for is having it ask me questions that I can then answer that help me clarify things.
Mm-hmm.
But the more focused it is, and this is why, you know, I spend 0% of my time thinking about AGI, the artificial general intelligence, because when that happens, we all collectively retire as a species. That's fine. And for those who don't know, AGI is usually defined as, a computer can do any task as well as any human. It's a bit bold considering humans can't do any tasks as well as any human. And so I think that for the foreseeable future, AGI isn't really something we need to worry about. Agents, though, which have specific context, they're focused, they can do one thing really well. I think that's going to have a bigger change, and that's why the buzz is all about agents right now, is because those are the things that are actually useful.
Yeah, and just to back up your point about AGI and agents in general. I was reading, I think it was a Medium article. I can't remember the name of the author. I read a couple by him, so I should really find out because he writes some good stuff. But he's taking the other stance, which is he doesn't think agents are going to take off like anytime soon. Not useful agents. I mean, you can argue this point, of course, because obviously Agent AI is an agent-based platform, right? But his view is those more autonomous agents are going to be really difficult because they can't access enough data in the way that you'd want it to access. And he used the example of travel planning because that was always the use case that came out. I think when you go to Google Gemini and you go to the integrations, there's like some
Terrible.
sort of travel integration or some sort of restaurant integration. I don't know. But he said the complexity of enabling an AI to have access to all of the flight data, all of the online sites, all of the whatever, almost makes it an impossible task to make that one specific use case fully autonomous. So I kind of agree with him. I think it depends how far you want to take it. I think, yeah, to your point, like where we've got a generation of bots that can literally do anything and we do not have to do anything anymore, then yeah, that's maybe the argument that he's making there. But my perspective is there are still an incredible amount of use cases, even for that semi-intelligent agent, whether you call it an AI-powered workflow or whatever you choose to call it, that people need to be using more of, to your point earlier, where you say, like, either adapt or die, essentially. You don't want to be running a really expensive resource-heavy business where you've got competitors A, B, and C now, because companies are growing faster than ever, right? That are running a team of 3 people as opposed to 30, and they're outperforming you just because they're working. Again, I hate the term smarter than harder, right? So over to you to discuss a few of the use cases I guess you've been seeing right now, and I can't remember the notes I had on the question, but I'd be interested to learn more about the AI use cases that you are finding the most exciting at the moment, and maybe the ones that like people aren't just noticing that people really need to be using to get that low hanging fruit. So I don't know whether you want to talk about that.
Yeah. So first, just to go to the agents and trust thing.
Yeah.
Agents are still just software. They're not people, right? I hate that we call it artificial intelligence. This is why we shouldn't let engineers name anything personally. Sam Altman had a great thing on that. He's like, yeah, we're running out of dumb like number letter combinations for GPT-4o mini and stuff like that. Like, it's not what you name things. But it's all been a spectrum of trust, right? Like, we trusted AI to tell us when to send emails. Everybody's interacted with like autocomplete as you're texting. That's the most basic level, right, of AI. And now we trust it more. We trust it to not finish a sentence. We trust it to finish a paragraph or to do like more robust things. And so over time, we'll learn to trust it more and more to do some of those things. I'm not going to trust it to plan my travel because I travel a lot and I have very specific requirements, right? Like, I'm okay connecting Atlanta for 3 hours. They've got a nice lounge. I don't want to be in the first row because you can't put your bag under you. Like, yes, you can teach AI some of this stuff over time, but it's just faster for me to do it myself in some cases. So it's just a spectrum of trust, and over time, we're learning to trust it to do more and more, but it's still not there yet. Again, just like an intern. In terms of the practical use cases, I I tend to see it in like 3 buckets. So the first bucket, the most obvious one, is automate all the stuff you hate doing. So, taking notes. I have AI agents that go to meetings for me, and their summaries are pretty good. I stopped about a year ago having to go back and listen to the recording to make sure that the notes were accurate. Like, I trust it now that the notes are relatively accurate. You People are using it to like automate email spam, LinkedIn spam. Like, that's, I feel, the least creative way to do it, but it's fine. Like, it's a thing that you needed to do that you were doing manually, and you're using it to save yourself time. A more interesting way, I think, is to use it to give yourself skills that you wouldn't otherwise have access to, or you'd have to bother somebody, right? So, sales reps can design decks that are like pretty okay without having to bother the marketing team. The marketing team can write code that's pretty okay without having to bother the engineering team. It's still not going to be as good as having like an elite person do it, but my local pub wanted to have a drunken spelling bee game, and so I built that for them. I didn't have to bother my engineering friends, even though I haven't written code that's been used by people in 20 years. I was still able to like accomplish that bit. Or actually, in the early days of HubSpot, there was a woman named Diana who like took a week off, taught herself jQuery, and like figured out how to have slide-in CTAs on the site. Now anybody can do that. It's great that she did that, but it sucked that she had to do that. So like giving yourself, we're all still like T-shaped and we've got our areas of specialty, but the breadth of which things we can be mediocre at is much, much higher. Like I can do elementary data science, etc. The third category that I find most interesting is kind of the opposite of the first category. So people using AI to write LinkedIn posts and send emails or whatever, they're just kind of being mediocre at scale. I like it for people who are trying to communicate better. So a friend of mine, a few months back actually now, I was texting with him and I said, "Are you using AI to write your texts? Because unless you talk to Adoptive Voice, you can kind of tell." And he said, yes. He has some learning and communication disabilities, and he's just using it to like say all the stuff that he's thinking about. Now rewrite it in the way that Sam likes things, bullet points, etc. I rewrite it in the way that Brian likes things, which is longer form kind of reasoning. And I think that the people who do that, who say, how can I use AI to help me communicate better and be more human? Crisp.ai just launched something that is accent. So it's got noise cancellation, was kind of their original thing, but now they have accent management. So if you're working with teams in India, Latin America, et cetera, being able to work with those people, a lot of times the struggle has been our accents are hard for them to understand, their accents are hard for us to understand, and like using AI to get better and better at communicating based on language. So most people forget that the T in GPT transformers were originally built for translation. So like, yeah, cool, you can use it to write LinkedIn spam, but you can also use it to provide support in languages that you don't have to speak. You can use it to have cultural context, right? So like NPS surveys, net promoter scores, really popular. In lots of parts of Asia, that's kind of like a weird thing to do. Like they're not going to, you're asking them how likely are you to recommend HubSpot to a friend or a colleague. They're like not going to do that. That's not culturally appropriate. So you can use it to automate things that you don't want to do. You can use it to give yourself skills you otherwise wouldn't have had, or you can use it to communicate more effectively with people. And I think that's the really beautiful thing, where and inverse, right? Somebody built an agent on the site I thought was fascinating. When somebody sends a support ticket or leaves a review online, it preserves everything that all the important things of what they were complaining about, but it strips out all of the meanness, the vitriol, right? Customers aren't always, the nicest people in the world. They're upset for, whatever reason, and those are valid. And you want to be able to respond to that, but not have your support reps or your social media manager or whatever have to deal with a bunch of abuse. And so they were using it to like preserve the meaning of what the person was trying to say, but strip out all the things that would stress the person out or the person receiving it out. And so I think that is for me what I find most interesting, is how can you use it to be more how can you use it to communicate better, be more respectful of people's time, be more inclusive of languages, accents, cultural context, that kind of stuff. You can absolutely use AI to replace your live chat reps, right? Or at least some number of them. Instead of having 30, you can have 3, right? Because they can handle 10 conversations concurrently. I think that's a pretty uncreative way to use it. I think that the winners long term are going to be the people who say, cool, now can my, instead of having 1/10 the number of live chat reps, can my live chat reps have a 10 times more empathetic, contextually relevant, and helpful experience for the people that they're chatting with? Using it to cut costs is fine. That's okay. Using it to create competitive advantages, I think, is more interesting.
I think you bang on. So, and this is what I've taught in some of the AI training sessions I've given. And it's not too dissimilar to your 3 buckets, right? Like use AI to think, use AI to do, use AI to learn. And I think the communication barriers is also something that's fascinating. So I read I think it's on the shelf up there actually, Shoe Dog, the Phil Knight biography, how he built Nike. And a lot of that book, when he was a youngster working out of his garage, was flying over to the East. I think it was Japan, because he wanted to sell those trainers in the West. Yeah, that was where, like, he just fell in love with them. He loved everything about shoes, and those were the ones that he wanted to sell. Because the sales conversations and the whole communication and the etiquette behind speaking with people in those different cultures was an incredible learning curve for him. So I think he read books on it. Obviously, he didn't know at the end of meetings like whether something was good or bad, because there were like deadpan faces and he had no idea what to make of anything and all that sort of stuff. So no end of stress for him, like trying to determine, did the meeting go well? Did it go badly? Did I do the right thing? Did I do the wrong thing? Whereas now, like it's just a question away, right? And I was actually doing this last night, and I got down a bit of a rabbit hole. It sometimes happens. So I've been studying copywriting, and a lot of people would say, "Why are you doing that?" Like that's surely a dead skill, right? Like why would you want to learn about copywriting? But I think the ties to human psychology and human nature, what are important about copywriting. And I think that's one of the biggest gaps in AI at the moment, is it lacks feeling. And there was a great, well, he does a book. I think his name's Eddie Shaler, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. He does a book called Very Good Copy. It's also a newsletter, but I read the book, and he pulls out a scene from Good Will Hunting, where it's like master and apprentice type stuff, right? And he compares AI to sort of like the cocky youngster, like who thinks he's got all the answers, but actually hasn't suffered the realities of losing a loved one or being rejected or whatever it happens to be. And I think through good copywriting, it's all about identifying that very human desire or that human challenge, and painting a picture of how you can help support that future, right? And I think there's legitimately a case in you using AI as a junior copywriter. Yeah, and I did a post about this, right? So previously, you'd have 6 junior copywriters, give me 25 tags each, and then it'd go up to the copywriters and then the creative director, and then they just bat each idea away until they got to this one big idea. And I think for me, that's what the human element is about at the moment. It's about finding that angle, and it's found in journalism as well. Another great book, Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. Incredible book about why some ideas are remembered and why some aren't. And one of the chapters is about focusing more on journalism practices. So what a journalist will do is they will try and find the lead. And the lead isn't just a generic headline, it is that angle that's likely to be unexpected and grab attention and get people to look up. And now, of course, it's on social media, it's on your phone, right? And I think being able to use AI as a sounding board to find that edge, providing you've got that kind of quirky, unexpected, oh, I know what the human feeling element behind this is, I think is a good recipe. But the reason I got into the rabbit hole is I was actually doing a social media post, because what's working quite well on LinkedIn at the moment is this Japanese principles. Like I remember like a few months ago on LinkedIn, all you'd see is like ikigai type posts. And it was fascinating to me because I post more about sales and marketing now, because it's where I've spent the past 15 and a half years. But I was speaking to Claude and I was thinking, right, okay, well, tell me about some unexpected Eastern sales practices that the Western world could be able to learn from. And that's what reminded me of the Phil Knight story, right? And yes, it might not be super accurate, but then you can go away and you can use like DeepSeek or ChatGPT deep research to, do all of that source finding and make sure it's legitimate and all of that sort of stuff. But also what I like about being able to speak with AI so quickly is the ability to zoom in and zoom out on specific things. So I also asked Claude to give examples and see whether it could tell me a bit of a story that sat behind some of these, because you know what happens when you speak to AI, right? It just gives you a load of bullet points. And you think, you're right, I can't really take away much from that. I might have learned something on surface level, but it's really difficult for me to imagine that in a real life context. So with examples and it telling you a story, it can do that. But the problem with AI is because it's so difficult at finding its sources, you don't know whether the story is legit or not, which means that obviously the research still needs to go on, right? But in doing that, it gave the story around, I can't remember what the Japanese term was, but it was all about precision in sales process, doing everything exactly right, like spacing on paragraphs, like binding margins, 2 millimeter tolerances and all of that sort of stuff that we just wouldn't think about in the Western world. You just think print it out, right? But the example it gave was of a Japanese gift wrapping experience. And I don't know whether this is true or not. I've not validated it. I'm sure it is, but it is generally accepted when you go to a store in Japan that the package will be lovingly wrapped in a very precise way, in a very consistent way, so that whole customer experience keeps them coming back, and I think sometimes you don't always appreciate the story that goes behind things, but my advice there is like, follow your curiosity. And that's what I'm finding more and more about this human element. Is humans element to be ability to be creative comes from being able to see connections in things, and you wouldn't be able to tie a connection between sales and Japanese gift wrapping, but now you can, and that could be potentially a high performing LinkedIn post in itself, right? So I'm going to start rambling, but over to you to add your perspective, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, nothing wrong with rambling, right? Again, good thing about AI is people can filter out the rambling if they want to, or they can benefit from it. A couple things. One, just based on the nature of how AI is trained, it is by definition only able to do things that it's seen other people do, right? So it's able to be mediocre at scale, like we said before, and that should not be the differentiator for your business or for your career or whatever, right? It's just like the fact that the AI can do that. What the work that you're doing has been done by so many other people so many times that AI can do it. Does not really. It's not going to be as good at the 3-word stories and all that kind of stuff that requires that emotion. But the point that I love that you brought up is letting AI help you understand other perspectives. So again, going back to the third bucket of being able to communicate better and more empathically, like I always tell people, if you're just dipping your toe into AI, just go and ask it to explain to you how the people you work with, work for, or work for you perceive you in your role. Right. So, we joke about explain it like I'm 5. There's also explain it like I'm a CFO, explain it like I'm a VP of sales, right? Like understand how the people around you see things. And then as you're writing copy, HubSpot was easy, right? Because we were marketers marketing to marketers about marketing. I once sent an email that said, I know that I know that you opened that email and didn't click it. Trust me, it'll be worth it. It was great. People thought it was funny. Most people don't have that kind of, fishing with dynamite approach to things. Where I was a marketer, so I understood how they would see things. So asking it to help you be more empathetic, step outside of your perspective and your background and everything else like that, and ask it to criticize the process or the communication or the post that you have. Adopt a perspective and be like, what about this might make you uncomfortable, or what about this really resonates with you? I think that's something that it's not going to do perfectly. It's not going to do it nearly as well as a focus group or something like that. But most of us don't have the time or budget for focus groups for every single thing that we write or create or paint or whatever. And so being able to get closer to there, I think is really interesting, where it's again, are you using it to make your life easier, or are you using it to make the lives of the people that you're trying to interact with easier? Your life easier is fine. It just writes the post for me. I don't have to do it. Making other people's lives easier, have it, I have previously exported all of my LinkedIn contacts, imported it into an AI agent, had it look at the things that they post and things like that, and tried to understand what is it they like to read. We were talking about Medium earlier, right? I once crawled. I did not scrape, because otherwise the HubSpot legal team will get mad at me for saying this. All of the highest rated leads in the CRM. What were the things that they were reading and highlighting and stuff on Medium, and then our content team said, cool, let's write more stuff that these people want to read. So I think that is, again, it's a beautiful way to use AI, when you are able to understand life experiences that you haven't had and can't have, right? I never would have even occurred to me to look into retail store gift wrapping practices as they pertain to sales processes, just because it's not a common thing here in the US, right? So I think that is the people who are going to win are the people who are using it to communicate better and not be lazier, right? I mean, you can, right? Especially right now, probably for the next several years. If you just want to use AI to make your boss think you're doing the same amount of work you were doing previously and spend the rest of your time skiing or golfing or playing chess or whatever, you can get away with that. But I think you're going to lose relatively quickly to the people who say, cool, I now have more free time. How do I make the content I'm creating, the things that I'm saying better for people? That's beautiful, right? The fact that you can do that. And then, whether it's NPS surveys or, being able to practice in advance. I love doing that. One of the first AIs that I built was just because I mentor a lot of people who suck at interviewing, right? Because unless you're a sales rep where we expect you to be good at managing the conversation, if you're a marketer or engineer or something like that, it's harder to tell whether you're good at your job or you just suck at interviewing. And so one of the AIs I built was have it go to Glassdoor and the company brand and everything else like that, and have it let you practice the interview ahead of time. And you could do it with a sales pitch or any kind of social interaction. With an interview, you don't do it very often, right? You've probably had a few hundred interviews maybe in your life throughout your career, but it's an incredibly important thing that if you screw up might change the trajectory of your life. That's a lot of pressure. And so being able to use that to say, am I communicating what I have, what I know, what I feel, the way that the other person wants to hear it? I think that's the most interesting way to use AI. Data analysis, coding, everything else like that's really interesting. But if you see AI as a mirror of the human condition, because it is, it's trained on everything we've said, written, yada, yada, designed, then can you use it to help you understand people better? I think that's a more interesting way. I think it's a more value additive way for businesses. And frankly, I just think it's like the world we want to live in, right? None of us want to live in a world of just like AI generated slop where everything's mediocre and similar. We want to live in a world where people communicate with us better and where what we say resonates with other people better because we're able to speak their language, sometimes literally.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I've got a couple of thoughts. So one that I'll come back to is what you said about us being able to build an understanding of people we wouldn't necessarily have an understanding of. So I want to come back to that because I do have, and they're not against that. I do believe in that, but I do have another perspective that I'd love to get your take on. But the other thing that came to mind is the associations between things, so you're talking about like interview prep and all of that sort of stuff. I think, yes, it's one thing to be able to come across well and lead a conversation and so on. But I think, and just looking at the interview example, I think being able to have a story and a different perspective and a differentiated is the word that I'm looking for here, right? So how can I communicate better? And sales and marketing angle is all about this, right? We spoke about finding an edge earlier or an angle earlier. Some people call it like finding the purple cow. It's a big like Seth Godin thing, right? And difficult to find because there's an argument to say, right, well, you might as well just focus on doing what works 1% better rather than try and test a load of stuff that's gonna not work and then never find the purple cow or whatever happens to be. And I'm sure we could have an entire conversation on that. But what I wanted to get across there was the connection with things that you wouldn't normally make a connection with. So another book, again by Chip and Dan Heath, the same dudes that wrote Made to Stick, they did, I think it's just called Decide. I can't remember what the subtitle is, but it's all on making better decisions. And there's a lot of stuff in there about confirmation bias, spotlight, whereby you only look at like one or two options and forget that actually there's probably a lot of other options that you can look at before making that decision. And I can't remember the last piece, but it was related to problem solving. And the story, and I love the story, it was, I think it might have been Speedos. Anyways, it was product design focused, right? And they wanted to take a new type of Speedo to market, and they wanted it to be fast, and they wanted it to give obviously their wearers a competitive edge. So a member of the design team decided that it'd be a really good idea to look at other stuff that was fast. So she went to a museum and she got somebody to show her a shark because sharks are fast. And she touched it and she found that actually sharks aren't smooth. Like their skin is like lots of little tiny teeth. It's rough to the touch. So it wouldn't seem like it's like really fast, but it's those, I don't know the science behind it, but it's all of those like little micro fins essentially that add to its momentum in the water, apparently. Again, don't know the science behind it. So she looked at that. And then she also looked at the science behind torpedoes. Yeah, why do they go so quick? So there was like a shaping element there as well. So she took all of that, and they ended up making the swimsuit out of like some new like rough material, like in line with the shark skin analogy, and then like some sort of shaping. It wasn't it was basically a whole body suit that would suck in your shape, kind of like a corset, where essentially you'd become more streamlined as a result of wearing it. So material and shape is what came from the shark and the torpedo. And the performance of the swimsuit was just completely off the chart. Yeah, so it even got to the point, I can't remember whether they did it or not, but they almost got to, if they didn't, ban, but because it was giving people that much of a competitive advantage. But the takeaway in the book was obviously, if you can find, they call it laddering up. If you can ladder up to find tangential industries or concepts that you can tie to the problem that you're trying to solve, it could give you an advantage. The other one was like the guy who did Walmart. Yeah, so he was sniffing around his competitors, and he found that some shops were all just checking out at the end rather than having multiple checkouts all over the store. Yeah, which of course led to reduced staff costs and all of that sort of stuff. And it's only by going out into the world and trying to find these different ways of working that the real like business opportunities came about. And with AI, we don't have to do that sort of stuff anymore. We can't, I mean, we still do. Like, I'm still a real advocate of, if you want to understand a persona or a market, go and work there. Yeah, because an AI is still not going to tell it to you from the perspective of somebody who's actually doing the work, unless you've got a very clever prompt. And even then, like, it might not even get there, right? But just being able to shortcut that sort of stuff, like being able to say, look, like, I want to use this framework from Decide, it's called laddering up. I want to find associations with tangential industries that might help in my problem solving. Can you give me some ideas? Just supporting that thinking process, I think, is a massive opportunity that people just aren't thinking about right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's two really interesting things there. One, AI has this thing called a context window, which is essentially its short-term memory, right? And we have the same thing. So I actually know the shark thing because I remember in middle school science class, they were talking about how Olympians, their clothes were being made the same way for running. But it never occurred to me until just now to like retrieve that bit of information because you said it, right? So being able to kind of expand your context window so you don't have to remember everything, because that is a challenge. And then also just being, there's a thing in AI called hallucination, which everybody's familiar with, where it just makes up stuff that sounds true. That's definitely a bug in terms of you need to check its work and make sure that it didn't like make stuff up. But I think it's also a feature, because if AI hallucinates a product that your customers might want to buy from you, but it's not something you sell, maybe you should build it, right? And I think the people who are doing this really well are actually academic researchers. So The Economist had a great article on how AI is being used in science to help people who might just wildly different disciplines. They're not going to run across each other at a science conference or whatever for their specific discipline, but helping them learn what other people are doing that might interest them. And there's actually precedence for this. So this is going to sound super boring, but I promise it's more interesting than it is. I did a bunch of patent strategy research at MIT. And so like I have a tattoo of a patent on my arm. It's my grandfather's first patent from 1952 or something like that.
Amazing.
And the reason we have a patent system isn't because a bunch of Enlightenment thinkers thought you should be able to own an idea. It's because they thought that if we gave people a temporary monopoly on that idea, and in exchange they have to explain to everybody else exactly how that idea works, that everything's going to go much faster, right? So the thing I always use, there was some dental drill patent that was filed, and the oil industry was like, wow, this is just a much better way to like spin things really fast without having them light on fire. So being able to access that kind of information, it's hard, even in the patent industry, nobody does that anymore. The original intent of the patent industry, now patents are like a dirty word, even though it's absolutely not what they're intended to be. It's because people use them wrong. So I think, yeah, like one is expanding your context window, remembering things and thinking of things you wouldn't have, creating those connections. I think hallucination as a feature is really good there. And it's also, you said something earlier about like, why don't you focus on what works and doing the 1%, increment thing? I was talking to the CMO at HubSpot a couple weeks ago. His name's Kip, and he was talking about how he didn't realize kind of how bored we had all become as marketers, because everything was a game of millimeters, right? It's like, how can we get 0.1% more yield out of something, 1% better, et cetera? And that's just a really boring game to play. Now it's like, how can things be 10x better, 100x better? How can, things that are entirely new that we hadn't thought of, like, be part of our strategy? And I'm having fun doing marketing again for the first time since probably 2016. Like, it's probably been almost 10 years where, in the early days, if you had a blog and had social media and stuff like that, it was incredible competitive advantage, right? Like, I was the 9th most popular CMO on Twitter back in 2009 because there were only like 20 CMOs on Twitter, right? So I was CMO for like a small e-commerce company, and I was able to have chats with the CMO at Best Buy and Dick's Sporting Goods. And I think obviously when things become well understood, well studied, they become commoditized, which means they're not a competitive advantage anymore. And I think a combination of like all the stuff we know, right? Like the team always jokes that I just know a bunch of random crap, right? So like Sam's Greek word of the day is like a thing that happens sometimes, or like a metaphor about sharks or space flight or whatever. I think expanding the context window, being able to understand, like you said, these connections that other people wouldn't make. We know we should do that, and this allows us to do that at scale. And then also, again, just like having fun. You can find this overwhelming, and you should find this overwhelming. By the way, as a caveat, I literally study this for a living and find this overwhelming, and don't feel like I'm up to speed on everything all the time. And I'm paid to be up to speed on everything all the time.
Mm.
So if you feel like this is overwhelming to you, I promise you, no one else is very far ahead of you. It's very much like the early days of the internet, where it's just like, if you knew HTML and CSS, that's how I built at the beginning of my career. Where I was like, yeah, I know how to code a web page because I was built my first computer when I was in 4th grade. That is, I think, something you can have a lot of fun with and be able to bring in all of these other angles. Like, so whether it's the shark thing, even just thinking of it from a design perspective, if you're thinking about designing a logo for that product you were just talking about, like that shark angle, sharks are scary. We find sharks scary. We don't think of sharks as fast. But if you're designing like a logo for it, can you find a way to incorporate that, that edged kind of pattern, that almost scale mail pattern? I have another tattoo with that, that they have into kind of the design aesthetic. That's something AI is not going to do. It's not going to figure that out for you, but it might be able to help you draw those connections.
I think that was another example in the book. There was a company that sold frozen chocolate covered bananas. And that, like, there's high demand for that, right? Anyway, they didn't have the budget for the prime store placement, so they were at the back of the freezer. So they got the marketing team involved and said, I don't think it was the same book, actually. I think it was a different book. We need help. How do we sell more, essentially? And the team came in, they had a look at the design, and that's where they started. Like, how can we research? And that's where copywriting came from, right? It's like, how good is the research? Like, if it's a good product with good research, then we can do anything, right? We just need to provide a window to the product. And I think on the banana packaging, I don't know whether it was like a duck or a bird or something like that. But either way, the team thought of, right, okay, well, bird footsteps, like, can we have like duck footprints on the floor leading to the freezer space where it is and all that? And granted, they managed a way to find a consistent theme that came off the package design, which is probably one of the unfair advantages they had, because the branding was really good, and used that as a fun exercise for the kids that were their target market, who could follow the footprints to the freezer, who would then ultimately buy the chocolate covered bananas. And I think sales went up like 20-30% or something like that. And that is such a human thing to do, right? If you asked an AI just point blank, right, how can I sell more of this? It would give you a bullet point list, but it wouldn't look at that and say, right, well, what's your existing advantage? Yeah. What have you got going for you right now? Where is it going to be? Like, what does that user journey look like? Like, walk me through the store, So I think, yeah, sorry, go on.
What's interesting about that story? You and I, we keep talking about these examples where you have teams and you can do a study, or you've got like a bunch of copywriters or something like that. One of the reasons I'm really bullish on AI, and I started off as an AI doomer, by the way, and I can tell the story about how I became an AI boomer enthusiast at some point. But I was concerned about the impact that it was going to have on younger professionals, on small businesses, et cetera. It's actually had the opposite impact. So, like, one of the dirty secrets we never want to admit is we talk about small businesses being the backbone of economies, and in the U.S. they're very much not. Like, a lot of our GDP growth is not driven by the small businesses. That same Irish pub that I was talking about that had the drunken spelling bee game I built for them, when I say non-technical, I mean these people need me to help them update the website, kind of non-technical, right? Like updating QR codes kind of stuff.
Yep.
They were feeding into just straight GPT, just a regular interface, all the ingredients that they wanted to get rid of. So booze and food and stuff like that. And it would generate recipes for them, give the recipes names, and they were doing inventory turnover optimization that would make Amazon proud, right? Which is the name of the game with those businesses. So I think what's really interesting to me is not that the large companies are going to replace those teams of copywriters and everything else like that, but what does the world look like when everybody has access to those teams of copywriters, to those kinds of logistics optimization things, without having to have the technical skill to do all that kind of stuff. What you need is you need to care, and you need to have the creativity. Like, you need to care about your business, you need to care about your customers. They're not just like, you always see these TV shows or whatever, and the manager of the restaurant's like, "Hey, really push the fish because that's about to go bad." That's thinking about yourself, right? Versus saying like, "Hey, push the fish because it's a great new recipe people are going to like." Also, so happens that we need to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Like, that is an extra layer, I think, that makes me really optimistic about the future, when you don't need to have that big team, because not everybody has the time or the skill or the personnel or the budget or whatever to do the kinds of stuff, the really beautiful things that you're talking about that people have done in the past. Now, I think soon everyone will. And that's the world I want to live in, is like, not 100 companies in massive enterprise silos, dominating everything. Like, is one of the reasons, like, I'm particularly passionate about the work that we do. Is I don't want to live in a world in which, like, you need a lot of budget. The context in which you can use the tools is constrained. You have to have technical skill, etc. And then, my 16-year-old nephew lives in rural Tennessee, and he's the most prolific AI agent builder on our site. And I have not helped him in any way other than giving him the credentials that he has. He's much smarter than I am, and that's just not something that would have existed previously. Like, TGI Friday, or insert large restaurant chain here, has people doing inventory turnover optimization. Patty Cassidy's Irish Pub in Cocoa Beach, Florida, does not. It has 2 owners, right? And it's also why I love the fact that this has become more of a conversational interface. The reason they were able to do that is because having a conversation is very natural. It's the most natural. It's how our entire species evolved to use conversation to communicate information back and forth. Um, and I love that they can do that. They don't have to write code. They don't have to think in a structured way, right? They don't have to know how spreadsheets work. They can just say like, "Hey, I've got a bunch of this stuff. I want to get rid of it. What would people who live in my area like? Like, what can I make with what I have, and have them and turn over my inventory faster, but in a way that actually helps the people I care about."
Really quick, guys, as you know, I don't have sponsors on the show. So to help me, it would be great if you could share with just one other person, leave a review, give a thumbs up, and subscribe. It really does make a difference. Now back to the show. Yeah, you're right. I mean, chat interfaces aren't going away anytime soon. And some people do use voice. But I have to admit, I don't really use voice.
I love voice. It's my favorite way to use it. I love voice.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, yeah, I did get some really good results when I used voice, but a lot of the time when I'm using AI, I'm putting my kid to bed, or like I'm sitting next to my kid watching its iPad or whatever, like, and I can't really talk to it. I should do it more during the day. I mean, a lot of people I know just have it like always on, like, "Oh, what do you think of this?" and so on and so forth. But for me, that might get a little bit too much. Like, I don't want like too much advice and information. Like, I do still want to have some of my own thoughts in my head, or whatever it happens to be. But no, I think coming back to the small business piece, it's a passion of mine. I've always worked for small businesses. So you talk about like coding being one of the things that used to do, like web design. That was how I made money as a side hustle at university. I learned how to use InDesign.
Yep.
I got a dodgy copy of InDesign and Photoshop, and I designed the newspaper ads for a luxury bedding company. Like, so that was the past. But of course now, like, probably do it in half the time with an AI tool. You just need that, I guess, that human eye to assess the impact, right? But no, the reason I'm a supporter of small businesses is because I do believe that if like my dreams come true is the way that the world is moving. So when I did my TEDx, I mean, the title of my TEDx is how tech can enable a rock star career that makes money. And it's indirectly the story about how I made my first money online. And I didn't really want it to be one of those, look, I'll teach you how to make like $1 million, because there's too much of that. I didn't want it to be that. But there did need to be a monetary amount because people needed to know that it was real. And it was a story. So it talked about my music career. Like, I was at a crossroads, right? I could have either stuck with music, or I could have gone into the corporate world. I chose the corporate world because I needed to pay rent, which meant that the music is, well, still now on the back burner. Unfortunately, I really enjoy what I do now, which is great. But the TEDx was an experiment in, right, what if I had the technology I had today, and I'd chosen that career path, would I be in a different place? So it's a thought experiment more than anything else. But I closed that by saying that anybody can use the tech and anybody can make money on their own terms. And that's what I hope for my kids. Yeah, I don't want them to be in a position where they think, I need to do X to achieve Y. I need to do X to get a promotion. I need to do X to do blah, 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 blah. I want them to be able to say, I really love this. I think I can help people doing this. Like, go to it. You see what I mean? And if we can engineer a future where tech is literally the enabler that will provide that resource for kids like mine to be able to go out in the world and really help people, then that's the game winner. That's the goal scored, right?
Yeah, I mean that's beautiful, right? Being able to have kids or even just people earlier in their careers. Like, I'm sure there was a way that my nerdy love of, history and science and stuff like that, that I might have been able to make that a career. But I grew up in a relatively small town. The career counselor, not counselors, there was
Yeah.
only one. Didn't have time to talk to me and about everything. Didn't have the ability to know everything. Now being able to say like, hey, these are the things that I enjoy. Like, can I just design a business off of, I don't know, customizing Disney ears like that I've got behind me or whatever like that. Maybe I can, maybe I can't. But having it help you figure that kind of stuff out, is there a business and be good at it, right? Like, here's the thing: small business owners are, you don't get into, you don't open an aluminum siding business. I'll use this example for a real story, because you like doing marketing and cash flow analysis and stuff like that. You get into it because you're passionate about that building. You like people, so you open a restaurant. You like food, you open, you like food, you open a restaurant. And people are just generally bad at business. Like, in the early days of the HubSpot agency partner program, we had to teach people like, here's how to charge retainers, here's how to set pricing, here's how to do billing.
Yeah.
And there's a big debate on our team. By the way, to clarify, I no longer work for HubSpot. We're entirely separate, so I get to say whatever the hell I want, and they can't tell me not to. So you get like some of the fun stories from the early days. But there was a debate on our team, like, is it our job to teach them that? And we're like, well, yeah, if we want to have successful agency partners, they have to be good at running a business. And so we ran workshops on like, here's how to manage cash flow, here's how to set your prices, all that kind of stuff. And I think that's really cool. Like the aluminum siding example, I had a guy the early days, and he was blogging, and he's doing the social media, he's doing everything he was supposed to be doing. He was aluminum siding company in Arizona, and at one point he's just like, I just want you to tell me I'm doing a good job. And this guy's like 50, and I'm like 25, right, at the time, and that made me pause and think and realize that part of my job is to help people be good at stuff that are necessary evils, but that they're not in any way passionate about, so they can focus on the things that they are really passionate about. And I think that that's one of the things AI is going to enable at scale is, not everybody can afford to have, a consultant that's handling everything for you. Or even just going back to to the communication style thing, right? Like a big blocker in a lot of career growth is communication styles. I have an AI agent. So Dharmesh Shah is the founder of HubSpot.
Yeah.
He's also founder of Agent.ai. So like nominally my boss. I run the project. He like pays all the bills. And he famously has like a sorry no calls philosophy. Like I think I have physically talked to him twice since we launched this project. And I have an AI that I've trained on everything he's ever said and done, all his speeches, yada yada, all his articles, and it helps me decide, should I ask his permission for XYZ. It's pretty simple, right? It's like, cool, we're gonna do, there's a conference in New York, and we want to like get a bunch of taxi toppers and like do some stuff. I'm like, should I ask his permission to do this, or can I just do it? And it does a pretty good job. I think only it errs slightly on the side of asking for permission, just because I'd rather be like slightly more right than wrong in that case.
Yeah.
But it lets me, be able to interact with somebody in a way. It lets him manage a team the way he wants to manage a team. He does not want to talk to a bunch of people, but he can be part of all the meetings. He can be part of all the decisions. He can only be looped into the decisions that he wants, and be able to run that business in a way that doesn't make him want to hate his life, right? Just like they don't want to learn. They didn't even know the term inventory turnover optimization at that pub, right? Like I just saw it and told them that that's what they were doing.
Yeah.
They're like, cool, bro. We just wanted to like make people happy and sell more stuff. I'm like, cool,
Cool,
great, let's
bro.
do it.
So I want to go back to the point that I prefaced earlier, where you were talking about AI enabling us to learn about talking marketing terms, right? About personas that we wouldn't normally interact with, like if we want to serve and advertise to or to provide value to, is probably the better way of phrasing it. AI can now allow us to build domain expertise in that area where we may have not had any before. And you and I were discussing before we hit record on my summary of AI, which is, if you're a junior and you don't have experience at anything, it's going to allow you to at least be half decent at it. But if you're a seasoned pro, it's probably going to be a step back in terms of its default response, which is why people like us train AI agents with our domain expertise that they can do better stuff, right? But the reason I preface it by saying I have a slightly different perspective is I think that in this age of differentiation, the competitive advantage isn't going to be being a generalist, and people might disagree with me there, but if I learn about everything and if I can communicate with everyone at a reasonable level, I am wasting an opportunity to become really good at one thing. So I guess it's a question for you from a marketing perspective. If you're looking at what an unfair advantage is, and previously you gave the example of I was a number 9 CMO on Twitter because there were only 20 on Twitter. That was your unfair advantage because you were on a platform that was unknown or at least not very used at the time. How do we create an unfair advantage now? Are we becoming generalists until we are not? Or are we doubling down on the one thing and using AI to get there? Because I mean, brands becoming more important now, trust becoming more important with all of that generic content. So I'm curious to know whether you've got a perspective, because the jury's still out for me. I mean, I think the more that I've changed my brand, the more I start to realize you have experience in an area. You may have some experience in other areas, but in reality, when I gave myself a talking to, 15 and a half years in sales and marketing, the writing's on the wall. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Over to you. What is your initial thought on creating an unfair advantage in this world that we live in?
Yes, to your first point, I do think we are entering the golden age of specialists,
Mm.
because AI is going to be a good generalist, and it's a little worrisome for people like me who have kind of built our careers as generalists. Like
Yeah.
I'm just barely okay at a lot of different things. There are some things I'm really good at. I'm good at recruiting. I'm good at managing a team culture and that kind of stuff. And I still remember I was fundraising for my last startup, one company ago, and my director of finance and operations was sharing his screen with the VCs, Googling how do I calculate free cash flow as a marketplace. Unfortunately, the VCs knew us well, and so they let that go. But it was pretty funny to have the person that's asking you for $10 million be Googling the answer to a finance question.
Yeah.
But I think that's going to be okay and much more accepted moving forward.
Yeah.
Because if AI can do everything at a mediocre level, it is the generalist on your team, then you can focus on the competitive advantage is how can I be really, really good at something that AI can't do? How can I, create those kinds of competitive advantages? I think that is very much a good thing. I encourage people. I like the concepts of things like liberal arts degrees. I think that at the baseline of education, we probably need to stop specializing humans as early as we do,
Mhm.
to where you're on a specific track at the age of 12 or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to do that as much. I think we should give people a broader baseline, but then from a career perspective, I think find the thing that you're passionate about, and especially in a world in which you no longer have one career tied to a company. And I think this is going to happen. There's going to be a lot more fractional work. There's going to be a lot more fluidity in terms of who you're doing work for.
Mhm.
I have the think sign from IBM over here because my father-in-law, spent 30 years with one company,
Mhm.
retires. Thought I was psychotic because I had 8 jobs in 15 years, and just not the way things work. I think moving forward, people are the concept of that job isn't going to be what is interesting to people, right? You're not working for the company. You have skills and you rent that out to a bunch of different people. There's a great article. It's over 10 years old, but it's Special Forces Innovation, how DARPA, which is the U.S. like government innovation lab, how they design and manage teams. If anybody is listening to this, and like, I recommend you go find that article and then feed it to an AI and ask it to explain it to you, because it's a bit dense. It's like a Harvard Business Review article or something. But I think that's what organizations are going to look like. I think that's what careers are going to look like, is more of the, how do I get the specialist team that I need? So Agent.ai, as an example, we are a temporary team. We're not part of HubSpot. We will eventually become part of HubSpot. I have recruited a bunch of people for specific tasks. Not all of them are full time, right? Like right now, I'm having somebody like work through like a finance, like cash flow kind of thing, bringing in somebody to help with like PR, and they're going to go do other things afterwards. And I think that's fine. And in my case, it's okay, because I'm like, it's just inherent in the nature of my model, is like, we're not building careers here at Agent AI, right? Like we're trying to do something we think matters, and then we're going to hand it off to people to like go scale and have fun. We're going to go do something else, because my specialist skill set isn't going to be what's needed there. So I do think that that, yeah, like leaning into, you talk about like the ikigai, right? Leaning into that, there's a reason that's all over the internet right now. It's because that's becoming less of a aspirational nice to have, and more of a practical reality of like, find the thing you're good at, the thing you're passionate about, and the thing people are willing to pay you to do.
Yeah.
That's unlikely to be one company moving forward. And I think that's a good thing, because I think you'll be able to find more of that in your career when you don't have to do all the like stupid stuff, because you don't want to have to go find a new job.
Yeah. And it's interesting. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about ikigai, especially in recent years. So for long-time listeners of the podcast, I was on the corporate ladder until July last year. So now we're in March 25. This was July 24, where I started my own business, and was and still is freelance. Yeah. So yeah, I'm still building my business model in the background, which is probably like some form of digital asset or whatever it happens to be. But right now, I'm just working with the companies that I enjoy working with, and they are making use of my skills. But the problem that I've had in my career today is like, and this isn't blowing my own trumpet or like tooting my own horn or whatever the analogy is I'm good like you at a lot of stuff. Like I'm not excellent at one thing, but I can hold my own with most stuff, right? I'm a quick learner, and the reason I'm a quick learner is because I take something, I apply it to a project, I put it into practice, and so on. Which is why I became known as a bit of a systems guy with all of the companies I've worked at in the past, because I'm thinking, right, well, if I need to do more of that, then I need something to do the heavy lifting, so I'm not like creating a ton of manual tasks. Like HubSpot is the example, right? Like for me, it was the dynamic space to begin with, and then I implemented HubSpot 3 times, and then I got to the point wherever I joined a team, I was like, I'm not doing anything unless I've got a CRM system like HubSpot to do the heavy lifting for me. So systems came first, then the data analysis came, because especially in sales and marketing, if you don't look at the data, spot the trends, see what's working, see what's not working, then like you're not going to build a pipeline very quickly, and so on and so forth. But then I started working for myself, and I thought, right, well, I've spoken a lot about finance technology. Like I've spoken a lot about technology. I've spoken a lot about AI. Who am I? and I'm still kind of figuring that out. But with the podcast, I've just told myself now, I just want to speak to a load of great people and have a load of great conversations and see where that goes. But in terms of my career now, like I've just given myself a talking to and said, right, well, 15 and a half years in sales and marketing, like that is your skill. So do more of that. But my recommendation to anybody who is going through that ikigai process is it can become quite, and woo-woo is probably the wrong term, but you hear about all of these seminars and all of these finding yourself exercises, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I do have a spiritual side of me, but I think people are kidding you if you think you can go to a 2-day event and find your purpose in life. Like it's like that's just not the way it works. You've got to try everything. Like you've got to try something, fail a couple of times, try something else, and then see what hits the most with you. And for me, if I could distill it, it would be firstly, don't necessarily think about what your purpose is, because I think if you know what your purpose is, you are incredibly lucky. Like anybody that can say, this is my purpose, this is what I'm going to do, I don't care if I make money or not, because I'm so driven by this is what I want to do. Like you're lucky if you found that. So if you have found that, do not let it go. Yeah. So purpose is at the top. And then passion, which is right. Okay, well, it might not be my purpose, but what am I very passionate about? Like kids, guitar, sales and marketing, AI technology, whatever it happens to be. But then if you haven't quite found your passion, focus on what you're good at. because you find that the more you do something that you're good at, the more you feel better about what you're good at, the more you become passionate about it, and that could ultimately end up as your purpose. So that's my kind of scientific method behind all of these things. But at the risk of rambling, I do agree with your perspective that the world is becoming more fractional. I think the importance of a brand and trust is going to be more important than ever. And I think we are already seeing, and it will become more and more important, is founder-led brands building businesses. Yeah. And then using that platform to either continue that business or branch off into other businesses. And the best example I've seen recently is a dude called Dan Coe. And he used to run a branding agency. He's like grayscale, and his voice is a bit monotone. Like, so yeah, there's a question over how his YouTube videos have done so well, and the argument is the content's like really fucking good, right? So he's exploded, but he just started writing. That was his first thing. Like, I'm a writer. I'm going to write about controversial topics. I think the tagline for his newsletter is like, join X amount of people getting mind fucked every Saturday or something like that. It's like, it is that kind of, it would be shock advertising if it was given an advertising term, but it's just controversial, contrarian, whatever it happens to be. And he's done really well from it. But he's then escalated off of his philosophy, which is don't be a specialist, like find the connections, find the interconnectivity between things, and then find what it means to be you and write about it. Diarize your life, and be your own product, essentially. And he's now at the point where he's developing a SaaS product, as most companies do nowadays, right? So he said, right, Notion isn't good for writers. Yeah. So I'm going to create a Notion for writers. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm sure like he'll make millions from it, right? Because he's got the platform and he's got the brand. And I think we're going to see more of that, not just in terms of what's working now, but in terms of the opportunities that it opens up for people as their brand grows and as their business expands.
Yeah, a couple of interesting things on that. One, when I used to teach, I would do, it's kind of a shtick, but I'd pick up a pen and I'd drop it, and I'm like, 100 times out of 100, that pen is going to fall and hit the ground, right? That's hard science. Economics is a social science, right? Where sometimes under exact same circumstances, most things might happen similarly. Give that answer to a physics professor, and you're going to get a very poor grade, right? So like understanding that like the binary answer of like, is specialization good or bad, like just taking our conversation, it doesn't really have a single answer. And we've always wanted things to have single clear answers. It has, the most annoying thing you can ever hear somebody say is it depends, but that is in reality 90% of the time the actual truth. And then we were talking earlier about how what I find fascinating is you're using Descript and stuff like that to help with this podcast, so that you don't necessarily have to like have the budget, and you don't have to sell sponsorships, right, in order to afford somebody to help you with the editing. And I think that in a world in which AI can do a lot of that for you, what matters more is, do you have a perspective? Do you have something interesting to say? And it doesn't have to be that polished, right? It has to be good enough, right? And so AI is helping everybody get to be like good enough. And then the best, most interesting things may not come from HBR IdeaCast. It may not come from TED Radio Hour. It may not come from the HubSpot blog, right? It may come from somebody who has something interesting to say and isn't really good at saying it the right way, right? Being engaging and impactful and everything else like that. But can use AI to help them create, and that's what I think is really beautiful. Again, and interesting about all this is you can specialize and generalize at the same time. Like I really believe in understanding like a wide variety of things. Personally, it's just also fun for me. Like I like learning a bunch of weird random crap. But then being able to focus that into your passion and say like, how can the fact that I'm really passionate about space exploration, I'm really passionate about Star Wars, I'm really passionate about I play chess. Like how can I use those areas of passion to then help me like do things that people actually find value in? I think that's going to be the really interesting transition where who cares, right? Like if you've got a big production team and everything else like that, it's like you're so overproduced. It's like I don't care. And frankly, like I find that the people who have the most interesting things to say are the ones least willing to sound like a thought leader and do the whole LinkedIn, with your walking your phone through the city kind of like thing. The smart people don't. The people who actually know what the hell they're doing don't do that.
Yeah.
I hate when I go to conferences and somebody is up there giving marketing advice and they haven't ever actually run a marketing team.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, like the advice you're giving is completely useless.
Mm.
But the people who have run marketing teams may not be the most dynamic speakers, may not have time to do that kind of stuff, may not have an interest to this stuff, may just doubt themselves a lot.
Yeah.
And I think the more that we can enable the people who have an interesting perspective to share that perspective with people, I think it's going to be a very good thing. It's not a regression to the mean in terms of mediocre content. I think it's going to be more of like a Cambrian explosion of like, everybody can be a podcaster. Everybody can be a thought leader. The question is, do you have actually good thoughts? Not are you just good at the one-liners? Scary for people like me who like the team literally has a Sam bingo game that they play because I have so many one-liners that I trot out all the time. I found this out because 2 companies ago, one of the sales reps didn't mute themselves on a team meeting and shouted bingo. And I thought it was hilarious. I think it was great. Like they actually have a spreadsheet. My wife helped them make it of like things I say a lot. But I think that, for a very long time, that's been very important is how do you distill those one-liners? But that doesn't mean I have the most interesting thing to say. It just means that I'm really good at being pithy. And I think, my wife may have much more interesting things to say. The people on our team, Andre, who is our head of engineering at Agent.ai, fancy master's degree in AI from Columbia, yada, yada. I cannot put him on a podcast. I love him to death. But unless it's a podcast of technical nerds and engineers, which isn't most people, he's going to he's going to go way off the rails and he's not really going to do it. I think is an interesting future, a future in which like he can be interviewed and then like everything he says is translated into something that actually is like impactful and interesting to the listener.
Yeah.
Who does this really well? Zoom. Zoom has their AI companion, and you can ask it questions during a meeting. And so I'll be like, what are they talking about? What does artifact mean here? And they're like, and it tells me like, hey, in the context of this is what they mean. So I think like that is very much a good thing where whether it's getting mind fucked or whatever it is, right? Like how can we surface the people who have something legitimately interesting to say versus surfacing people who say things in interesting ways?
Yeah. That's such a good summary. Such a good summary. And I think, so this is the last question I tend to ask, and then you can tell us a little bit more about Agent.ai. But the question I'm asking now is what it means to my guests for somebody to be irreplaceable. And I think there's so many points in this conversation that we've moved towards that in terms of ability to think human, find connections. But if there was one thing that you'd advise people to focus on if they want to become irreplaceable, what would your recommendation be?
We've talked a couple times so far today about how like brand is becoming more important. I actually think we're in the golden age of brand marketers because people are trying to do language model optimization. That's not really going to be a thing, right? Like SEO, there was a science to it, it's keywords and links and stuff like that. The way that language models work is much more about like what does the kind of like zeitgeist writ large think about you? What do they believe about you? That's more of a brand story. How do you get other people saying a lot of this stuff about you? And that comes down to trust. And we talked about this at the very beginning. I did not intentionally bring this full circle, but it's convenient. The spectrum of trust that we have with AI. If you think about who's irreplaceable in your life, right? Like my wife is irreplaceable in my life. There's no like, disruptive innovation that's going to have me be like, oh, I'm now going to like swap out my wife's subscription for a new incumbent wife subscription. And I think that like that trust and that reciprocity, people who have done something for you, like at HubSpot, we always talked about the core of inbound marketing being giving value before you ask for value.
Correct.
Like we didn't have the best tools. We didn't have the cheapest tools, but we were the people who educated people on how to do inbound marketing, how to write blog articles and send emails and stuff like that. And because of that, people bought from us. We weren't the best. We weren't the cheapest. They are now. They like went through this big sprint of being like best in class. But I actually think that is a sad thing because I think it was really interesting when the growth of their brand was built on the gratitude that people had for HubSpot educating them on things and the trust that people had in HubSpot educating them on things. And I think that's very much going to be the same for all of us. It's like, can I be credible? Can I be interesting? Can I do things for other people? We talk about automating yourself, right? Like a digital clone. I mentor as many startups as I can, which is not nearly as many as I would like. One of the AI agents I built was so many times it's the same advice that I give, right? It's like, oh, I have a retention problem. It's like, Do you though, or do you have a pricing and onboarding problem?
Mm.
And being able to have that kind of like shallow level advice be accessible to a lot more people, and then they trust me, right? And sometimes they turn into like big large companies. I've mentored a lot of companies that have started with nothing and gone public, and that's really quite impressive.
Mhm.
And I think that if you're looking for how do you become irreplaceable, trust and gratitude. This sounds woo woo, right? But it is very
It's
true.
not.
True.
Yeah.
That like trust and gratitude are irreplaceable components of how we perceive other people. And you know, again, you can use AI to like spam at scale, or you can use AI to build more of that trust and build more of that gratitude. Have your live chat reps like, be able to spend 10 minutes with somebody on live chat and have them have access to all the contextual information about their business and papers that have been written about them, news about their competitors, right? Like, who do you think the person's going to want to buy from? Somebody who's using AI to optimize their EBITDA margins, or somebody who's using AI to genuinely help them and create that sense of gratitude and reciprocity?
I couldn't have summarized that better myself. I think the only thing that I'd add is it supports our point about businesses becoming more collaborative individuals than entities. So to use your HubSpot point, previously the unfair advantage HubSpot had is we've got the best content. We educate people. We build trust. Like, who are the first company that people think about when they tackle
Right.
X? And I think we're now moving to the point where people don't think in terms of companies as much. So if HubSpot then becomes right, well, yes, we're HubSpot, but actually we're a combination of these individuals that you follow and learn from. And some of those individuals might work for HubSpot full time. Some of them might work for them a day a week. But the point is, they bring their unique personalities and perspectives, and people then make that decision. Say, look, like I agree with the sentiment of that group of individuals. And I think that's the way that it's headed. But we'll have to see, right?
Yeah, I mean, just to give like a very literal example, I don't trust Google any less now than I did a few years ago.
Hmm.
However, I trust Perplexity more.
Uh-huh.
It has replaced Google in my life,
Hmm.
and in part because I think I asked it. I wanted to buy a new router or something like that, and I'm like, should I buy this fancy, expensive new router? And it asked me a bunch of questions, and its conclusion was no. And I was like, great. That means now I'm going to trust it more in the future when it says I should buy something.
Yeah.
Google, on the other hand, is very much like, not going to give you that answer.
Yeah.
It's not going to give you a straight answer because their business model is based off of brands paying them or having an entire discipline of SEO around how do we like get rank for that answer and then buying our way into that experience.
Mm.
So I don't trust Google less, but the fact that on occasion I'm sure the Netgear people who make my router would love to have paid Perplexity some amount of money to have it say yes there.
Yeah.
They don't. And that's what builds that trust, and that's also why I talk about Perplexity, who I'm not paid by and have no stock in or anything else like that. But I talk about them a lot, is because they are building that trust and that gratitude.
Yeah, the people and the things that have your best interests at heart is what we're saying there, right? So no, great.
Exactly.
Right, we've got a few minutes left. So Agent.ai, we should have spoken about this more. Maybe we have a round two, but what is it? Like, what can people do when they sign up, and where can they learn more about it?
Yeah, and again, like my my greatest concern about the adoption of AI is that people either don't do it because they're intimidated by it,
Mhm.
or which is like why I do podcast interviews and writing and teaching and speaking, or that we live in a world in which only large companies and people with budgets are able to use AI,
Mhm.
and they're only able to use it in the context of tools that have invested in AI, right? So if you're a generic CRM for real estate agents or something like that. I'm sure there is one out there.
Mm.
You're not going to be competitive with Salesforce in AI, right? They have thousands of people working on Agentforce. It's just not going to happen. You don't have the data. You don't have the budget.
Mm.
We want to live in a world in which AI is for everyone.
Mm.
So Agent AI is free. The reason it's free is because the performance of AI keeps going up and the costs keep going down.
Mm.
And we believe it would be stupid to charge for it.
Mm.
It'd be like launching a CMS company and charging per website visit. Like, traffic and storage is so cheap. It's like, that's a dumb way to have a business model.
Yeah.
So you can go to Agent.ai. One, you should go to the community, because we don't believe that we know all the cool things to say. So just community.agent.ai. And there's lots of other people there saying interesting things, pushing the boundaries faster than we can. But you can go and build AI agents. Like, if you can just think logically, you can build an AI agent, right? I have one that just like every morning, it looks at my calendar, looks at who I'm meeting, looks at what company they work for, fetches like their last 10 LinkedIn posts, news about their company, and generates an audio overview for me. So I go for a walk in the morning and I have an audio overview of who I'm going to meet that day and like stuff we may want to talk about. That's like a couple of years ago would have been wildly beyond my technical skill to pull off. And now it was casual effort. It was just a couple, maybe 10, 15 minutes, because I wanted to like have it go to specific sources. So one is like, everybody can be an agent builder, even if it's just customizing an agent. Take, the LinkedIn prospecting agent and say like, hey, I want to have it work for executive recruiters in Scotland, which is a real story, right? And have it give it that focus. And then two is helping people have access to AI agents. Like, we don't want to live in a world where my nephew in rural Tennessee can't participate in this. I frankly don't want to live in a world. I want to live in a world with the best ideas and the people who care the most win. And that might be a Lithuanian college student. It might be, a team in India. It might be, a team out of Brazil. And if we let it be, so like, why is my team so passionate about all of this? If we let it become a world in which budget, technical skill, and the context of the tools you have determine whether or not you can benefit from the AI future, like, I think that is the story of how I went from being a doomer to a boomer. Is like, I think that's like a dystopian world none of us want to live in, right? Where we go from having millions of websites to having thousands of agents and like dozens of primary orchestration agents. I think the way the technology works, I think the way the economics are being structured, we want to live in a world where anybody can go build an AI agent, anybody can use AI agents. Right now, we don't support the ability to monetize your agents. We will eventually. So, Apple, when they launched their App Store, did not know that Uber was going to be a thing, right? Or the story I love to use, Pokemon Go, right? Like, Apple made a ton of money off of Pokemon Go without ever having to come up with Pokemon Go or be involved in it in any way other than their app marketplace. And so, like, we want to enable that in the future, where you can go and build AI agents. You can take part in the benefits of it. You don't have to pay, because even just $200 a month for ChatGPT is quite a lot to a lot of people, right? And we kind of firmly believe that, and this is what the benefit of working for an eccentric genius tech billionaire is: you get to do irrational things sometimes. And burning a bunch of cash to let everyone have access to the latest and greatest AI models, and have a team that is focused on how do we make it easy, because it's easy to make things powerful. It's hard to make powerful things easy to use. That, I think, is it's exciting. That's why we do this.
Amazing. And then anybody who doesn't know where to start, that's not a problem. So you go straight. They've got a marketplace. So got a couple from Dharmesh there, company research agent, executive disc profile. That's cool stuff that ties to our like right sizing communication, all that sort of stuff. Recent LinkedIn, but there's so much on there. So yeah, Agent.ai, go check it out. It looks really cool. I'll definitely have a play over the next couple of days for sure. Excellent. All right. And outside of Agent.ai, people can find you on LinkedIn and that sort of stuff.
I mean, the downside to my name is it's hard to pronounce. The upside to my name is, if you Google anything even close to my name, you're fairly likely to find me.
Yeah.
LinkedIn, Twitter, I'm in the community. I try to respond to every message that I get. AI has freed up a lot of my time. Like, probably 90% of my time that I used to spend on dumb tasks is freed up to talk to people. Yeah. I have a calendar. You can book time with me. If you can't get in touch with me, you're not trying.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Cool. So I'll put links in the show notes, but essentially try and Google Sam Mallikarjunan and see where you get. But yeah, I'll put the links there so that people can pick up, and definitely check out Agent.ai as well. But it's been an absolute pleasure, Sam. I feel like we only scratched the surface today. So maybe like 6 months time, when you're this behemoth and like you're part of HubSpot again, then we can have another chat. But no, it's been really good. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. Thank you so much.
All right, Sam. See you later. Cheers. Hey again, and thanks for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard today, don't forget to like, review, and subscribe. And for more goodies, head over to adamshilton.com.